Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Another fine day for a webinar. How's that sound? This is Jeremiah, and we are about to show off some of our tools for grading and site layout, kind of this area of land effects that um, is certainly not as mature and capable as the planting and the irrigation tools for some very deliberate reasons and some accidental reasons, but over the years, we've definitely had a lot of wish list requests for tools in this realm, including, the very common refrain of, gee, I'd love to have something that has the capability of Civil 3D, but the ease of use of land effects. We get that one a lot. But of course, that's a giant undertaking is to replicate all of the functionality of Civil 3D. But there's some simpler tools that we can do and that we have done. And that's what we're gonna be showing you what we have and kind of go from there. So this would be a great opportunity for, I hope, a lot of wish list requests because we're definitely not saying this is the end all be all. These are simplistic tools with an eye towards further integrating them more into like a 3D platform in SketchUp and Revit and sky's the limit, really. So really would love to have your feedback. There is a Q&A button bottom of your screen. If you click it right now, it'll be very easy for you to type in those questions. But you're also going to see the answers that we type to other people's questions. So it makes a great little companion while you're on this ride with us. We are recording this webinar. It'll be up on the website later today. So that kind of covers all of my little housekeeping items. Time for me to hand it over to Amanda to start this going.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jer. And it's great to see everybody again for another webinar. So I'm Amanda Marin. I'm a landscape architect here at Land Effects, and I have a background in design and project management for all kinds of designs, from playground parks with soccer fields and paths on hills to green roofs and stormwater pond planting designs. And one thing I like to focus on is using the right tool for the job. I say this as somebody who's also done our Civil 3D grading series, and Jared kind of alluded to that as one of the other options for grading. And what I'm saying now in this webinar is you don't always need that complex of a tool, which led us to a lot of the tools that I'm going to show the basics of today. So I'm going to explain the premise of the tools today in the next slide, so we're all on the same page of why learning simple tools can really help you with project scope and time management, even if you do know more complex tools. Then we'll jump straight into FXCAD, a 2D CAD drafting environment, to show you what you might have missed in the Civil and Survey Manager. So what do we mean by simple? While every design might benefit from a well-constructed 3D surface model, let's be truthful here. Landscape design and landscape architecture is a competitive business like everything else and has a design budget that a 3D model cannot always fit into. So we need to know when a simpler approach is simply more efficient for just as good of an end design. As a Civil 3D grading designer myself, this was always the ace up my sleeve. I'd use the tools I'm going to show you in a pinch, and I'd always save time on those simpler design projects. Also, Civil 3D can be pricey to maintain. The tools I'll show you transition well to export survey points to CSV format or export over to SketchUp or Rhino for some easier 3D work for much less cost. And this isn't saying that we're replacing or competing with Civil 3D or what Revit offers, like Jer said at the beginning. It's just easier to learn tools at a level between manual AutoCAD drafting and Civil 3D. So with it being easier to learn also means faster for new hires to learn to help them get better at grading design, especially for new landscape architects right out of school that need that work before they get into something very complex, like Civil 3D or Revit, and site layout plans with legends already automated. So this kind of gets you going. So that's why all this is still important to you, no matter your CAD or Civil 3D skill levels coming into this webinar. With that, let's see all of this in action. So here I am on FXCAD 2025. I have a plan going here. I have XREF'd in my base file, and my base file happens to have a survey that brought in topography already from the surveyor. And this topography in this XREF is just polylines, and the polylines have been set to an elevation. So that's a really important thing. If I kind of go in here and let's open up this XREF and look at it, when working with some of our simple tools, you'll find as we go through that they work really well with polylines set at an elevation. So prepping for all of this work, you might want to get something like that going. And if your contour lines from your survey are marked, but they're at a 0 elevation, even though you're working in this somewhat or definitely 2D environment right now in FXCAD, you can still set an elevation to that can then correspond over to other 3D environments like SketchUp, Rhino, and Revit, or also into Civil 3D if you later want to take this design over into Civil 3D. So going back over here, let's go through an overview of the Civil Survey Manager that we want to talk about. So first off, if I go up to my FX site ribbon with Land Effects installed, these tools over here, dropping down Ref Notes, and it's below Ref Notes right over here is that Civil and Survey Manager. That's the one we're going to be looking at today. All of these tools are included in our planting effects and irrigation effects licenses. So this is broken up by different tabs, and these function a little bit more separate than things are on some of our other managers, like the planting manager, the ref note manager, or the irrigation manager. The schedule buttons at the bottom of each of these sections actually launch a different schedule for each section because they are very different things. So instead of making 3 different managers and kind of overloading this dropdown with just a whole ton of managers, in this case, because they're all very related, they are all here together in the Civil and Survey Manager. And we went with this approach because we do have our eyes on a few wish list items that have been requested where it might just be better to add more tabs onto here for more capabilities for the same sort of point in your design process. So opening this up does require a Land Effects project to be set, a project number. So if you are starting this in a drawing and you're usually stuff like this might be a bit earlier in the design phase than your planting or your irrigation design. You might not have set a Land Effects project yet. Do remember that you still need to go over to that project list and create a project number and assign it to this drawing. So the first tab then that we're going to go through is this Civil Survey tab. This is for use for legend symbols. It's like a cross between reference note amenities and notations. It uses and displays symbols in the schedule, but it doesn't bother tracking quantity. So it's great for things like utility symbols. You can see some examples of some of the things I've already set up in here that are showing up. And we've provided quite a few out of the box for you. So let's have a look at that. We can go over to Civil Survey and click on New. And you can see the out-of-the-box symbols that come with this. Now, just like everything with our software, you can customize this. You can add your own symbols in here, but this gives you an idea of the kinds of symbols that you might see in here, or that you might use for this. And the powerful thing about all of these that very much differs from how reference note amenities are usually used. Usually reference note amenity blocks. So these are all blocks. They all are just a one-to-one scale. You put them down and that's how they were saved is a scale they are, right? Because you always want a bench to be the same size. But these symbols actually are what's known as dim scale. So that means that depending on the plot scale, the land effects plot scale that I set to this DWG file, this symbol will come in larger or smaller so that every time I use it, it shows up as the same legible size on the plan. So in this case, I'm going to go and create a fire hydrant. We have a few fire hydrant symbols kind of out of the box standard in the industry symbol. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this one. I'm going to say okay, and we're going to call this fire hydrant. I'm going to say okay, and there it is in my list right here. So I'm going to grab that, and we can place it down on our plan. We can double click it or just click place. And there is that symbol. You can see how it's sizing right here. And it's sizing that way based on how we have saved it in so that it is always legible on a plan. And let me show you what I mean by that. So I have over here, if I think I accidentally froze it right before this webinar while I was testing something. So let me just make sure my work areas are turned on. So I have over here two work areas. My world scale, so my plot scale, if I go up here, I'm in FX admin or FX site under plot scale. My world plot scale for this drawing is 1 each equals 40. That's what I determined would fit the best to fit this plan on a full sheet of paper, like I've done over in my layout space over here. So this is 1 to 40. But I've created two work areas. We have some power tips to explain this a bit better if you haven't explored work areas for scale before. But I have two work areas, one at 1 to 40 and one at 1 to 20. So if I go to place that same fire hydrant over here, you can see it sizes at this size at 1 to 40, which is the same as it did over there. But if I go over to the 1 to 20, and this is imperial decimal feet scale. It does the exact same thing with metric or architectural inches, meters or millimeters for metric. But basically, that's what we mean by dim scale. So how it sizes when you place it in model space really depends on how you plan to view it through a scaled viewport. And if we go back over here, you can see what that means. So over here, there are two different sizes in model space. But if we look at how that relates to an actual viewport scale, so if I look at this symbol through a viewport that is actually set to 1 inch equals 20, or for metric, if you that's about I think it was 1 to 100. No, it's the same size as the 40 scale. So that's what we mean by dim scale. It's going to come in at a legible size on all of them because this system is set up, or these symbols are usually, you want them to be a size always legible, and the size it takes up really doesn't matter for these items like it would for a reference note amenity item. What really matters is that you see where it is, you understand what it is, and you're identifying the location of that object. So things like flagpoles, I have in here, some maybe water and gas shutoff lines. I've got in here some electricity, electric or telephone poles. And I've also, you can without getting into any of our lighting tools or anything, just identifying where electrical panels are on buildings, or things like if we go over to the new section, I'll just point out you can do things like that fire water service connection lines on buildings. You can put that in there. And then once you have this all set up and you've kind of laid out a few things, I'm just going to delete these for now so that they don't show up on this. There we go. You can run a schedule of this, and this just creates a basic legend. So I might do this over here on the L101 page, because you can place this onto a layout space as well as into model space. I can go and click on schedule. I have work areas in here, so it's asking me about that. I'm going to right click for entire drawing, and we can place this down over here. And that just creates that very simple legend for all of those items, nice and lined up. Now, you might have heard from our forum posts and a few of our social media posts that we have some new schedules coming down the line with reference notes. These schedules that I'm using right here actually do work off of that new reference note schedule. This one's still in the works, but some of the other ones that we're working on also use it. You can find the new one to test out by just going civil and survey legend new. So if you want to test that out, it's likely going to go live and replace this button. It's in August about, I think we're planning. So it would be good to test this out now and just give us any feedback on how you might want it to improve further. But that's basically what this one is doing, your basic symbol legend in your drawing. So let's keep going though. I'm going to go over to model space again, and let's look at the next tab over, which is northern easting points. But before I do that, are there any questions that would be good to answer now while we're just thinking about these items?
There is, Rob chimed in and he mentioned that there was a forum post fairly recently where they were hoping to get letters in with those northern easting points as an identifier. And so that
Right.
that is definitely still on the wish list. And I was just mentioning to him, just the way we engineered it, never really saw that. So it was always just a number. To be able to add an alphabetic character to it is just going to require kind of re-engineering of it. So in the meantime, we did add the series. So you do have the numeric series that you can organize them with, and we can actually build off of the series rather easy. Actually, a lot easier than adding an alphabetic character in the number. So the next most possible is we might just give you the ability to give each series a name, as well as a numeric start range. That would be an easy thing to do.
Mhm.
But those sorts of feedback is exactly what we need to hear. We need to know what additional capability we need to throw at it. We will kind of timeline that out. But my style of engineering is, Amanda well knows is, if something can be done simpler or quicker, do that one first, and then timeline out the larger, more ideal solution.
Oh yeah, because the easy one is less likely to break and just easy to build off of.
Exactly.
Well, kind of explaining that question, then let's look at these northern easting points to see all about that. So the simplest way to use northern easting points, which is actually the original functionality of it, but as Jer mentioned, we've beefed it up with these series. But originally, all you did was you go place while on here, and you get this little target. So you find what you want to lay out. This tool is used for laying out your site, uh, in particular for then the contractor to maybe export these points as survey points and use a survey tool to lay them out on the site. but to give them very accurate pinpoint locations. So if I go in here and I just pop that in, it auto numbers to 1. And if I keep going, so I might say, okay, the end of that one is 2, and it's following my snaps. So if I really, really wanted to, I could go down in here and maybe even turn on nearest if you really wanted to. I like sticking to endpoints because that is a whole lot easier, or center points. Those are easier to then kind of work out and lay out on the site as well. So if I go in here and let's go 3 and maybe one up here, 4 and 5, and we'll kind of go 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm going to right click to end this. That ends the command, and that refreshes this view so that they all show up in here. So with this, we can just do a few things off the bat. Let's kind of do this little baby steps to build up to those series. So I can run a schedule. I'm going to run this one right now. That's how our original schedule is. You can do drawing or table, but I'm going to go ahead and try out that new schedule. So this is June 28th, 2024. Let's go north. There we go. Northing should pop up. Let me grab that northeast point schedule new. For some reason, it didn't autocomplete like it has been before. So this is what the new schedule options look like. You can do a table with grid lines non-plot or plotting, just like with the new plant schedule upgrade, or you can send it off to a spreadsheet. And here's where you can do by a series, and we'll kind of cover these in a bit. But this is the simplest iteration of it. And I got a nice little schedule like that. So you can see in here, it's using the schedule title font and header font that I have set in my preference set, my general preference set. And then it's listed out all of those points that I've placed and the northing easting values of those. Now, these northing easting values, as they are right now, are based off of the world coordinate system in this drawing by default. So that means if I do a polyline and do it to 0, 0 right now, that's where they are all coming from. That's where 0, 0 is. So it's saying 0.3 over here is 32 north of that point and 4.8 east of that point. That's how that is working. Now, sometimes, a lot of the time, you might have a local survey point, a local survey marker for your site, and perhaps your drawing is actually has 0, 0 more to actual real world coordinates, kind of geolocated, so it might be a little further off in the distance. And you are using UCS's, user coordinate systems, in your drawing. So the setting to switch from world coordinate system, so the world 0, 0, to your user coordinate system, your current UCS 0, 0, is going to be user R3, just like that. So by default, it is 0, and that's world coordinate system, and 1 is for UCS. So you would just hit that, and then it would count the 0, 0 for this schedule from the UCS 0, 0. If it's set to 0 like it is here, even if I switch this drawing and apply to UCS, it would still calculate northing easting from the world UCS, or the world 0, 0. I'm just going to cancel out of that and keep it at 0 because I don't have a UCS applied in this drawing at this time. So kind of tying back to the other civil survey section, though, you could locate that local survey marker with a block here in the civil survey and have that in your legend. So these two items can tie together that way. So moving a little bit on from that, one question that comes up frequently is, okay, so I'm currently in a units of decimal feet, but frequently people might be using, say, architectural inches. And if you were using architectural inches, these northing and easting values will actually come in with those units. So if you want to use the units, different units than you're drawing, the recommendation is to start using more XREFs. So you would open up a new DWG file, set the units how you want the northing easting schedule to read it, XREF in your base or your hardscape drawing or whatever into that drawing, and then start putting your northing easting points down in that drawing so that the northing easting point schedule will read it in that drawing's units. So that is how you would do that. The same thing with like a millimeter drawing and a meter drawing. If you technically work in millimeters, but you want this northing easting to be in meters, that's how you would do that. So then, of course, the next thing was the thing that we had foreshadowed to, which is the new series tool. So it starts out numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we can actually add series in here. So you might use series for things like marking out certain areas and separating them out in the schedule, and being able to go back over to different areas and continue marking them out without having to then go into each one of these and renumber them. By the way, I meant to mention, these are all M blocks, but basically act like M leaders at this point. So you can grab these, sorry, it's snapping. So I'm going to turn off F3 for snaps. You can grab these and move them around if you need to. They are still tied to this, but you can also double click them and just, if I click over in here, I can change that number that way. And then if you change a number, you do have to go up here and refresh this so that this section can read that change into here and update it. So if I go over to series, I'm going to say, maybe I want to organize them by 1000 series, 2000 series, whatever. Sometimes you might use series to denote, okay, the 1000 series, I'm marking out all the walkways. The 2000 is for all the parking lots, that sort of thing. You can organize it however you want. So let's start with 1000. Now I'm in the 1000 series. I go to place. It's going to pop down 1000 numbers. If I go and add a 2000 and go to place, it's going to pop down 2000 numbers and keep counting up from that. If I go back to 1000 and click place, it's going to keep counting from the last point in the 1000 series. Then let's keep going. So if I really didn't need these guys right here. Well, now I have 1000, 1, 2, 5, and 6. And I kind of want to pull everything back so that they are all in line. What I want to do is I just deleted those. I want to refresh this Civil and Survey Manager in order to reread and remove that from this list. And now I have a good list for me to use the renumber. So I can go ahead and renumber those. Yes. And that renumbers those to 3 and 4 to basically throw them all in line again. What you can also do, the other options you have up here is to edit a series. So I can go in here and say, I actually want something else to be my 1000. So I'm going to edit all of these to be 4000 instead. So I'm going to say, okay. And that just renumbered all of them. So with a schedule for these guys, the way that it looks, let's find a good spot for this schedule. I'm going to go to Northing. There we go. Point schedule new. Again, just like the new planting schedule and the ref note schedule that we have in beta testing, this allows you to regen or edit an existing schedule. So I'm just going to say new. Uh, and I'm just going to continue on with the same settings. And that is how this schedule kind of appears now. It allows you to put all of that in here. One thing I did not mention about these points, you can see there is this description column that you can go in here, select this and edit it and add a remark to each of these. You can also see this is an easier way over here to edit that number if you really need to, like maybe make that one a 10 and say that this is for walkways, uh, walkway north, something like that. There, that got edited. That one got edited to 4010. And if I go over and regenerate this, there we go, grab that. Walkway north has been added down here. The other option you saw in there, let's go back and repeat that schedule. I'm going to say another new one, and this time I'm going to do just the 4000 series. And now you can isolate down to just one section, which a lot of people really wanted to be able to create those schedules where they wanted to use the series for being able to show the numbering, restart the numbering for layout points on each different drawing. So you might have a drawing with just laying out this section at a smaller scale, and then laying out this section, and then laying out all of the stuff up here. You can have different northern eastern point schedules and use the series that way. The last thing that we have on here that you can use to organize this, if you need to, is of course the ability to delete a series. So if I needed to delete this and not have it technically count as a 4000 series at all, I can go ahead and delete, yes. And I'm going to refresh. Right. So that gets out of here. Of course, I can just always add it back in if I need to. There they are. One other thing that you can do in here, it can really help to locate. So if I grab, sorry about that. If I grab this and go to locate, that will just zoom extents in on that point in particular to find something and maybe tweak it, edit it, get yourself in that location. I think that's, oh, and I'll just reiterate that right now, these northern eastern points, the series can only use numbers and not letters and not any other symbols. So just keep it with numbers. If you try and add anything else, it will stop you. So that's about everything I wanted to cover with northern easting before we move on to spot elevations. Now would be a good time to maybe cover any questions that were more related to northern easting points or anything we've already talked about.
That was good. The other questions we've gotten were other related call outs. Bill was asking about alignment and station offsets, and Jeff was asking about distance and bearing call outs. And so those are things that,
Yeah, we've been
of course
talking about.
we've actually been talking about, and that was always the plan, and where we were kind of thinking was, kind of adding them right there to the civil and survey manager, adding some additional buttons
Mhm.
in here. is kind of where, it's one of those things where do we put the tool almost takes more than making it. But absolutely on the wish list, and that's exactly the sort of feedback that we really thrive on. Just knowing, because like I said, Civil 3D is a very vast program, and it's hard for us to know what's most important to you to have additional capability over here. And so just knowing that, yeah, some of these additional little call outs would really help. Those are absolutely on the queue.
Yeah, I know we've had a lot of conversations, especially about like horizontal curves and things like that, and trying to decide like how we can make it, if we do it, we want to do it in a way that's so much easier. And just again, keeping it simple because there's already those tools in Civil 3D. So we do not want to duplicate those. We just want to make a version of them that is simpler and easier to use and gets you where you need to go without going further than you need to. Awesome. Okay, let's keep going then. We're going on to spot elevations now. So over here, I kind of was playing around just before. They are very, very easy. So this is what they end up looking like. So if I go and place a spot elevation, so I'm here in the spot elevation tab, I'm going to go to place. Um, and we have some options here, but I'm going to just start with clicking it down. So we get this dialog and it defaults to to 0 elevation. So I can type in what elevation this is supposed to be. So like 10 point, uh, didn't read my 0, 10.25, for instance. And I can set an abbreviation over here, like top of curb, bottom of curb, top of wall, bottom of wall. And then we also have some options on the style. So I can click on this box right here and I get a few options on how these appear. These are typical industry standard ways of showing these spot elevations, which is why we've gone with them. So usually proposed elevations appear horizontal, while existing elevations will appear on a 45. And we just made sure that the spot elevation location point also follows that 45 and 90 degree like that. So in this case, let's say that this is an existing spot and I'm going to go over here and grab that one and say, okay, and just go in. So now it's only letting me put it in on a 45. So I'm going to pop that in and it just pops that. So that's 10.25 existing top of curb. Usually you wouldn't do that for a top of curb for an existing, but hey, you absolutely can do it. And you can go back and switch it around on the next one. So let's go and say we have a 9.63. And in this case, maybe we are pointing out a catch basin, for instance. So I might say that 9.63 is the rim elevation, but below that, 6.30 might be the north invert. If I can type, huh, sorry about this. There we go. There we go. Okay. And maybe at 6.15 is the south invert. And I'm going to go with a proposed for this in a box and say, okay. And that's that in there. You can see these all have wipeouts automatically behind them. They have that masking for M text inside of an M leader. These are creating multi-leader objects. So in this case, it is pointing down at this cross, and we can actually move this around just like any other M leader. It does give us a little bit more power though. So this is slightly smarter, and there's a reason why this is not actually connected to this. Now, if I were to move this, I believe we did do it so that if I were to move it, it does follow it, even though like the leader does follow it if I were to move this around, even though they are not actually attached together. But that is a very finicky attachment in AutoCAD. So sometimes they might detach, and just know that that can happen. And that's kind of an AutoCAD fluke. But we've done the best we can with the tools we have in AutoCAD for that. But what you can do from here is continue on with this. So again, when I was placing, I had those options. So I can do relative to existing, continue from last, or grid placement. So let's go with our relative to existing. And again, if you haven't noticed this already, just based on how we tap into mouse and keyboard commands in AutoCAD, don't go and click these. You do actually have to type in and enter to get that option. So we're going to select this one to be relative to, and we get this option to create a new point based on a percent slope or a ratio slope. So maybe I want to go up 8.5%, and I want to go up, and it follows a straight line in this case. And I'm just going to pop it over there. This is on a non-plot layer. So this is just for your reference. It will not plot. But this says 15.37 rim. We can go in here and we can actually go in and just get rid of that rim part, because this spot elevation isn't a rim elevation, but that is actually, it's going off of the top number if you happen to have a spot elevation using all three of those levels. When you do a calculation, it calculates off of whatever the top number was, just so that you know how that's working. But let's look at something slightly more complex. So let's go over here to this walkway going all the way up a slope, and see some more powerful tools that you have available in here. So one other thing it can do, so far we've done where we've clicked it down and we've typed in the elevation. You can also go in here and do a new one, and you can snap to an elevation. Now, this polyline I've drawn here is actually at a 0 elevation, but like I told you guys before, these polylines are not. They have elevation. So I can go place, and I can make sure my snaps are on and that they are snapping. I'm just going to snap to nearest for this one. And I'm going to grab something close to over here. And you can see it automatically fills in the elevation of this contour line because it is a polyline with elevation. Let's go and grab a different style, this one. And we're going to use this one going forward for this. There we go, 23 rim. So I might at this point say, okay, here, this is going to be at 23 as well. 0.00. Oh, it defaulted to rim because that's what I had in here. I'm just gonna get rid of the abbreviation. There we go. And we're gonna pop it over here, 23. So I can do the same up here. And this one, 53. So I'm going to pop this at 53 as well. 0.00. Great. I can even just delete this one for now. But I can place spot elevations evenly along here. Now this is, if I were grading this, I would probably like do a spot elevation here and kind of better smooth this out. But you can start to use this to influence how you are going to grade this using your expertise on how to grade plans and grade stuff like this effectively in order to give you guide points to help you more quickly then draw in your own proposed contours and start placing in your own spot elevations to start communicating how to regrade this slope for this walkway. So let's go ahead and I'm going to place, and we're going to go relative to existing again. We're going to select a source object. And in this case, maybe we do like, I'm going to go 5% up and see how that goes. But you can probably, I'll show you another trick to do this as well. But I'm going to go follow a polyline, place spot elevations every, let's use this for contour line use, like kind of mark out where we might want to start interpolating contours from. So maybe we go every 1 foot elevation. Of course, you can do, and I'm going to do that vertical distance. You can, of course, do that with horizontal distance and do maybe every 20 feet, put what the actual spot elevation is along there. In this case, I'm going to use it for figuring out interpolation. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to select this polyline and it is going to go all the way along. So that's actually pretty close. We kind of nailed it at 5%, and that has figured out where all of those spot elevation or those contour lines are going to cross, and we can start creating a contour line layer that would be more of a black and a gray, but a solid line, and tying them into there. I know one thing that we have been talking about is getting together some tools to be able to easier draw that, draw the contours. Of course, it won't place contours for you, but it would just give you the tools to be able to draw contours. So that's another thing kind of on our roadmap. But you can see how easy that just makes that whole, everything you need to do with that. You can also use this to double check your own manual grading design as well. Just make sure, use it as your second pair of eyes. And of course, these are all M liters. So if they do start to overlap a bit, you can grab one and move it out of the way. Now, the other thing you can do, all of these slopes are all still non-plot. You can always add a slope callout. So we don't have it on here, but that is over here in the FX site. Under site callouts, we have spot elevation there too. So you can use this tool from here. We also have slope callout and area. So if I grab slope callout, I can grab 1 point and another point, and it will automatically calculate the slope between them using the last way that you did any kind of slope calculation, either percentage or ratio. It kind of remembers the last one you were working with, and it just uses that. If I want to just add one in here, maybe I already know what it's going to be. I just want a simple symbol to put into my legend. So I can do a slope callout and just click down and rotate it around, click again, and now I get this percentage or ratio. So I might say, this way is a 2-to-1 slope. Obviously it's not, but you get the idea. That just acts more like a symbol and it is more manual. Now, one thing we can do with this is you have slope areas. So if I just kind of move this off to the side, if I were to go into, say, my planting plan or my hardscape plan, slope areas are better for those. But I'll just kind of briefly explain how they work. And because we're kind of running short on time, if we have time at the end, I can actually pull up a drawing and show them. But if I go the same tool, slope callout and area, it says arrow point or first spot elevation, which is what we did here. We clicked one spot elevation and then the next, or existing slope callout to turn into a slope area. So I can choose this and I can select a polyline or D to draw. And And this time I don't have to press enter after D. I can just start drawing. So I can say everything in this, any smart land effects object that falls inside this area, I want you to calculate at a 2-to-1 slope. And it will actually affect the quantity calculations, but it will also affect, if I go and just do a rectangle, I could show you this really, really easy. So I'm going to pop that down, and then let's do 10 by 10. There we go, 10 by 10. So obviously that is 100 square feet because we're in decimal feet at the moment. So if I go to area callout, this one right here, and select that, I have this really quick area callout tool. Great, that's 100 square feet. If I copy this rectangle and put it over here, the area callout tool also works with this slope area. So if I were to area callout this one, it should have worked in here. It might be I chose too small of an area and actually rounded up. That's actually what happened. So let me go over here and do a rectangle, a slightly bigger rectangle. I'm used to meters. So I was, let me go 100 by 100. That should show. And then I will pop this area way bigger. Let's just do that and move this down. There we go. And call it out. Huh. Okay, that one should have worked. So we'll have to figure out what happened there in my drawing. I'm probably just messing around with my drawing too much. Let's keep going. So with all of that, I'm just going to delete all this. There we go. This is, by the way, non-plot. It's just a confirmation of the area in there. Once you have all of these spot elevations, of course, you can run a schedule if you want to. You saw before with the civil survey schedule that they showed up in there, and it will actually put in that spot elevation TC or spot elevation rim. In here on this section, you can go in and edit these and add more of a description about these. So you can say that this is top of curb, and that will show up in the schedule. But you can also run a spot elevation schedule from over here. So I can go and run a schedule, or I should just run the new one. Let's go spot elevation. I gotta cancel out of here. Spot elevation there. Now it's auto completing. I've got table, grid lines, not in plot. These are our only options right now, but you can also send this to a spreadsheet. I'm going to show you what it looks like, and you can obviously immediately see that that's basically your output CSV file. So if I go over here and entire drawing again, I'm going to pop that down. So this is all of those spot elevations that I had placed in this drawing, and their northing and easting point values. One other thing to keep in mind with northing and easting points and with spot elevations is that these are, especially the spot elevations, are usually defaulting like in here to the units of the drawing and the precision set to these drawing units right here. So do keep that in mind. And the last thing is I had promised at the beginning that a lot of these tools are then allow you to transition into more of the 3D realm later. So you might end up using these just as a quick starting point before you dive into something as complex as more complex, whether that complexity is SketchUp or Rhino, or even over into Revit or Civil 3D. When these are placed, they have these are obviously multi-liters. They are not able to have elevation. Multi-liter objects just cannot have an elevation assigned to them. However, the block that we place with it can. That's why they're separated. So by default, when these blocks are placed, they are placed at a Z position, Z or Z position. And the reason we do that is because we do have a tool to of 0. We set it to 0. We don't put it up at the full elevation here because of that whole finicky tie-in. We can't always update the elevation in here. So the reason we do this is so that once you are done placing all of your spot elevations, before you output it to a 3D environment, you can always go and run spot elevation Z align. And if I run that, it's going to set all of the elevation arrows. That's what it means by elevation arrows, this spot, to a Z elevation. There were a few that I was playing with that are disassociated, but you can see this one now has that 47-foot elevation. And I do have some power tips that then take this and go off into the 3D realm. So you can find that if you go up here to help and then over to our power tips section. There we go. I'm going to go up here into here and go to videos and power tips. And then under power tips, just go over, I believe I have a lot, like one of them in the SketchUp one, where I take those FX spot elevations and make SketchUp topography for them. I also have, if I just go into just all of them, so unclick that and say spot elevations. We have more about these spot elevations, a lot of what I just covered as a power tip, and then also create spot elevations with Z elevation, which is what we just covered here. So those would be really good ones to share with your team as a quick introduction to all of this. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to cover in terms of the simple grading and site layout tools that we have here in the Civil and Survey Manager. I hope this opened your eyes to what we have in here that you might not have realized is there, and that you guys have some great ideas to share with us. But right now would be a great time to keep going with any questions that you think need to be covered live. Jer?
Yeah, we did. We had a really good one that just popped in here from Bradley on wanting to give a description to those abbreviations for the spot elevations. And I mentioned to him that yeah, they should actually show up in the Civil Survey tab,
Mhm.
and that's where you can there we go. You can yeah give them those descriptions there, and then that legend. So it's good important to know from here from this manager. It is a different schedule for each of those three tabs. But and so then that way there you go with in so however you want to
I would
explain
actually
what that abbreviation.
probably like say that top of curb, I'd probably just have it all the way up there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Schedule. Yes. There we go.
Boom.
Top of curb. So like this one might say spot elevation, whereas the rest of them with the abbreviations would actually say what that abbreviation means.
Exactly. And I think that is all of the questions. So, gosh, I guess on that note, everyone, you're just going to have a fantastic weekend. And please keep these wish list ideas coming, and we will catch you next time.